I am living with diabetes complications. Let me back up actually. I'm living with diabetes and I'm also living with diabetes related complications. I was diagnosed with macular edema back in 2012, and it was a diagnosis that really hit me hard because I kept thinking, is this because I didn't do enough? I feel like that's the question that comes along with every diabetes related complication, because it's always sold to us that complications can be avoided if we try hard enough, if we do enough, if we work hard enough, if our efforts are big enough. Sometimes, though, it just happens. You can try your best to manage this condition, and most people manage it very well and live long and productive, healthy lives with diabetes. But the diagnosis of a diabetes complication doesn't mean that you haven't tried hard enough, or that you're doing all these horrible things, or that the slippery slope has finally started to get too slippery to keep your footing on. Diabetes complications happen. They happen to people who are trying their best. They also happen to people who aren't giving much effort at all. The point is that they affect people living with diabetes. And if you develop diabetes-related complications, it's not a mark of failure. This is not the product of not being good enough. This is the product of diabetes. And I don't say that in terms of like, hey, well, I guess I just don't have to try and complications come to everybody. That's totally not the case. Complications might come, they might not, but if you get them, it doesn't mean that you screwed everything up. It doesn't mean that it's your fault, that you are a bad person. I feel like when people are diagnosed with complications, all of a sudden they feel like they have to hide, somewhere, and they're not allowed to talk about it. So they're not able to get the support that they need to deal with this new diagnosis. People don't talk about it. It's though they feel like they can't, and that they should be ashamed if something else has happened, if something new is added to their diagnosis list. I always felt like it was okay to talk about diabetes if you were a little kid, and it was okay to talk about diabetes if you were doing well and climbing mountains and, doing insane things that people are like, whoa, I can't believe you did that. You have diabetes. How did you do that? But all of a sudden, if you're diagnosed with something difficult or a complication or something that people are thinking you're supposed to be able to avoid, you're supposed to keep your voice quiet and keep your story to yourself. I think that people sharing their life with complications and diabetes is just as important as sharing the lives of complication-free diabetes, because really, is anything completely uncomplicated? I mean, let's be honest. I've had type 1 diabetes for almost 30 years, and over the last 3 decades, I've had a good life. I've tried very, very hard to manage this condition that does require a lot of effort, and a lot of time, and a lot of frustration. It's just this crazy, insidious disease, but I've done my best to manage it, and I work hard. But the diagnosis of macular edema didn't mean that then I was supposed to give up. This didn't mark the end of my life as a healthy person. It just marked the beginning of a new journey with a different health condition, in addition to diabetes. This is how life goes sometimes, I think. People with diabetes and complications need to be empowered not only to continue to live with their diabetes and try to manage it as best they can, but to also take this new diagnosis and do their best with that too. Doesn't mean that everyone ends up with diabetes complications. It's just that if you do end up with them, it doesn't mean that you've done this whole list of things wrong. You still have to work hard at controlling your diabetes, and you still have to do your best to follow the rules and be, I don't want to say the C word, but you have to do what's required to take care of your health. You owe it to yourself to live the best life possible, even with whatever you've got.